one, we'll be talking about his life as a writer. Vusi, I've read, I think, Magna Carta of Exponentiality, which I haven't finished, definitely, but it's one of, I think, the successes, I would say so, because at its debut in Spain, you sold over 6,000 copies.
That's right.
In just a day.
In the single day we launched.
In a single day, and you still have a lot of people asking to have these. And then Vusi's, it's Vusi's
Lessons from a Black Dragon.
Lessons from a Black Dragon.
Yeah.
That's one of the books that has reached bestseller in South Africa.
Yeah.
Very few of those. When did you think you could start writing? If I would start with that.
I always knew I could.
Okay.
I was never worried I could start writing. But when I was a little boy, my father used to say to me, there are two things about which a man should concern himself. Mm-hmm. The first is, what does he write? Because the things you write down will outlive you.
Sure.
And so when I was starting and developing in my career, I was under pressure from my agencies to write books because they felt I could propel my public speaking career if I wrote a book. I felt I was not yet at a level of maturity that I wanted to write a book. Here's the thing about writing a book, and this is what people don't understand. If I write a book today, in 30 years' time, people will read that book as a reflection of me. This is not a Facebook status that you can just go and delete. You've written it, it's done. So, I waited until I felt I was overripe for the moment of writing. And then that moment came. And we started working on the Magna Carta. It took us about 8 years in the research process to write the Magna Carta. Yeah. I mean, if you call a book the Magna Carta, I don't know if you know the history of the Magna Carta, but the Magna Carta, or as it's pronounced in Latin, the Magna Carta, is the Great Charter. And what had happened in Europe was the way the British system of wealth was built. Wealthy landowners were called landlords.
Yes.
And they convened at the House of Lords. Beneath them were the commoners and then the peasants. Peasants couldn't own land, so the peasants would farm land owned by the lord and pay taxes to the lord, and the lord would pay taxes to the king. And King John, I think it was, increased the taxes so much that the lords had to increase their taxes to the peasants, and people couldn't afford to live anymore. And so what happened was a gentleman organized for all the peasants to march on the steps of the king. It had never happened before. And when they arrived at the king's palace, they forced him to make a few concessions. And he wrote down a document, which was a declaration. And he wrote things down that the world had never thought about before. One of them was things like, all men are made equal. Until that day, it had never been proclaimed that human beings are made equal. The other was what is now the Roman Dutch system of law, of the idea of the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. Until then, it was never the case. And that document became known as the Great Charter, the Magna Carta. So, if you're going to write a book called the Magna Carta of anything, you better make sure that it's the Magna Carta, is the point I'm making. So we kind of went 8 years and we did a lot of research, and what I was trying to answer was a simple question, which was in a fixed environment with fixed constraints where there are various players selling identical products and they face exactly the same pressures. What separates great organizations from mediocre ones? We called the book the Magna Carta of Exponentiality. And the day I launched it in Spain, it had a sellout of 6,000 copies. The most extraordinary story. I'm going to be in Spain again in a few weeks, and I'm really excited because for me, going back to Catalonia always feels like going home. It's an amazing part of the world. So yeah, that's why I wrote that book. And by the time I wrote it, I knew my literary ability was strong. I just wanted to make sure that my hypothesis was strong and that the book could stand the test of time. I have to tell you one other thing we've done. The Magna Carta is on a limited print run. So we made a decision as the team. We would never have enough Magna Carta for demand. There should always be more demand than there is supply. So if you go right now and check the Magna Carta page on social media, you'll find tens of people who go, where can I get a copy? How come I can't get a copy? I went to the store, there's no copy. I want it to be that. I want it to be a collectible, something that in 50 years' time you sell at an auction for a little bit of money because you had the very first original copy.
That's interesting.
I'm at the stage in my life where I want to do work that matters, not work that makes money. Because I think if you do work that matters and makes an impact, money is the consequence. So that's kind of how I approach my businesses and my career.
Well, that's interesting. I think someone out there should be peeking that lesson. So do you think you want to continue writing? And how many books have you written so far?
Look, any author has 5 books in them at the same time. And so the question you're always asking yourself is this the book for this moment? I've got it right now. We're working on 4 different projects. 4.
Okay.
I can't tell you what they are, but
we'll like just wait until they're out.
But I'm really excited, and it depends. We might release one in 6 months. I think that's the plan by the team. Back home, the publishers of the view that we should over the next 2 years release a book every 6 months. We're definitely not going to do that.
Scarcity yields value.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to pick, where do we go? Because we've got a book that's retrospective but predicts the future. So it's like how history rewrites itself. We've got another one that's very Paulo Coelho, and it's about wisdoms and musings and higher existential experience. So there's just different projects. We've got one about entrepreneurship and all the, so it's which one do we go with first and at which moment and to which market? And by the way, behind all of this, you're always trying to balance the commercial part of it, right? Which is, how do we make sure that it financially makes sense?
If I could jump in your mind, I know exactly what's boiling in there and what it feels like. So throughout your experience as a business person and what you've achieved in life, what do you consider your greatest achievement so far? Because I know there is much more coming.
In business or in life?
Let's start off with business.
I don't know. Probably my greatest success in business has been that I have had the privilege of working with and building the most amazing people.
Okay.
And I've watched people who've worked for me move on and do the most incredible things. And that's the highest honor, to play a role in somebody else's life and somebody else's development, watch them grow, and watch them become a part of you, because, as human beings, once we touch each other, we're forever connected.
Oh, that's lovely. And in your life, the greatest achievement?
Definitely my family, my kids.
Lovely.
No doubt. They are my single most important priority, and the one thing about which there were non-negotiables, definitely.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Vusi, the family man. You keep traveling each and every time. The kids need you around. Mrs. needs you around. How is it easy balancing up your very tight schedules with business? And what advice would you give to someone in that sort of situation?
I always say to people, when you hear someone say, I'm too busy for something, they're lying. What they're saying is, you're not enough of a priority for me to make you matter.
Sure.
Life is about priorities. So my wife and I have a very clearly structured way we've structured our lives. We prioritize what matters. And I'm very clear not to let things overlap. I have missed board meetings because my son has a soccer game.
Oh.
And I promised him 2 months ago I was going to be at the soccer game, and I will miss the board meeting. I'm very happy to do it. I think in life, once you've picked what's important, the decision to choose what's important is the easy part. The hard part is following through with the decision you've made. So for me, I make time, and that's the time for family. We also, my wife and I, made the decision that my career is public. My life is not.
Private.
And a lot of people, I think, especially in today's world of social media, I see people make this mistake.
Your kids out, your spouse out.
You over-communicate. And I always say to people, life has ebbs and flows, and entrepreneurs will learn from this. There is no such thing as a business that's doing well all the time.
Sure.
Businesses go through cycles. Life goes through cycles. If there is a winter, there must be a summer. If there's an autumn, there must be a spring. This is the natural cycle of life. For fire to be there must be water. And so, whatever you communicate to the world, recognize that you have to keep communicating to the world through the cycles. Let's imagine you and I were in a relationship. and I start posting you and I on my
Everything.
social media,
Yeah.
the day things don't work out between you and I can't go to the world and say, things didn't work out, please give us privacy.
You want to keep the other side positive.
I invited them in when I posted us. Now I have to tell them what's happened between us. So my wife and I have been very clear. Personal lives are personal, and we keep that personal. And, you know, my wife always says to me, you're a public speaker. That's the part of you that's public.
Not a family speaker.
Not the
like
family
that.
speaker. When you come home, it's a different, and you know, and she's a pit bull. I don't want to get in fights with my wife, so she says it, she wins. It's
okay, all right. That's very interesting that a man would respect her. But you've come up with a growth fund, I think, with your wife for the youth. Tell us about that and your passion for the youth.
So, you know, I just sold my consulting business, the one I told you about. And I was having real questions about what does the next part of my life look like and who do I want to be. I'd been on the show called Dragon's Den, which I'm sure you're familiar with, back home in South Africa. And I'd watched the huge disparities of how money gets deployed to different entrepreneurs. Black entrepreneurs find it very difficult to attract money because the system of capital isn't architectured for us, because the capital environment is not mature enough, but also because a lot of us aren't given the level of education required to be able to raise capital. So if you talk to the average black person in a small business and you ask them about gross margins, net margins, payback periods, they don't know what that means. I always make the point to people that it doesn't mean people are unintelligent, that they're unintelligent. It just nobody taught them the concept. The minute you teach them the concept, they'll get it. So we created the growth fund with a single goal. We want to be the largest venture capital fund in the continent. That's where we're going. And we believe to do this, you need to build a strong ecosystem of accelerators. You need to build a strong ecosystem of funders. And you need to build a strong environment of regulation. And so that's what we're doing today. And to date, we have invested in businesses that have created over 2,000 jobs. And we're very excited about the work that we're doing because it means we're creating not only social impact, but also sustainable financial return.
That's very true. Well, that's very interesting of your life. But there is just one beat that we don't want you to go away with. Having been a singer, we will do that at the end.
No.
But just one more. We will definitely do at least a line. They say charity begins at home. And I want to think that part of your business experience or what you learned probably came from home, maybe from dad. Did you ever have any experiences in business with dad that you learned from? They could be positive or negative.
Dad started a business when I was very young and it failed. And he lost his car and the bank wanted to take our house. And
that happens with so many people.
The single reason today, I'm very careful what I do and I'm very careful how I manage my money is because I know what happens when the sheriff of the court is knocking on the door and you're told to hush so that nobody knows you're inside. It was a very traumatic experience. We had to leave home. We went and lived with my grandfather, moved from my grandfather to live with my aunt. And then my dad had to work his way back again, right? So those traumatic experiences always embed in your mind. And you're always very careful about how you behave in the world because you know that that wheel can come around if you're not careful.
Okay. Well, we have to be ending the show. There is just a lot of beautiful experience and conversation that we're having. I am a great fan of South African gospel music.
No, I'm not doing this.
He's refused.
I'm not doing this.
Of your best. I heard you sing before.
Did you?
Before the interview, yes. So we could get just a single line.
I don't know. I don't. There's nothing in my head right now.
Well, he's just refused to do it. But maybe finally, as we get out of here, we'll get you another time. We'll get you to sing another time. What's what's advice?
I'll tell you a story that'll help me sing for you. When I started my first business, my mom didn't approve of me starting a business. My mom comes from the era, and I think a lot of us come from households where our parents worked for someone. And so our parents' relationship with an income is a job. And when I said to my mom, I want to start my business, she didn't support me. And my mom and I were very close. And we went through this very difficult time, probably about 5 years where I didn't see my mother and I didn't talk to my mother. And you have to understand, when my father died, my mom kept the family together. So my mom has been the unit of strength for us. And for me to go through half a decade of an acrimonious relationship with my mother was very telling. True story. I'm in Kenya, in Nairobi, and I'm speaking in Kenya at the KICC. And there were 4,000 entrepreneurs in that room. And I was invited by the founder of a UAP, the insurance company, a phenomenal entrepreneur. And so I'm about to speak, and there's 4,000 entrepreneurs, and I do my thing, and I get a standing ovation. The deputy president was in the room, amazing time. And it felt empty because I couldn't phone my mom and tell her about it. So I went upstairs, and I thought, you know what? You're just feeling like this. You're being soft. Went upstairs, got into the shower, and I was taking a shower. And there's a great artist called Gregory Porter. He's a jazz artist. And he's got this song called Moving. Most people don't know the song because you'd have to be a Gregory Porter fan, like I am, to know the song.
Okay.
And there's a part in the song where he says, I wish my mother was here. Then he says, a strong, strong, steady rose. He closes it by saying, she would know what to do, what to say, how to pray to make things better.
Wow.
So I'm in the shower, the song plays, I heard nothing but that part. Got out of the shower, picked up the phone, and phoned mom. I was supposed to leave Kenya a week later. I canceled my itinerary.
Wow.
Got on the plane the following day, flew home, landed, and went straight to see my mom.
That's the relationship with your mom.
That's right, yeah, she's incredible.
Any message to her?
I love you, mom.
I know.
I love you, mom.
Okay.
I love you, mom. Stop asking for money, mom. No, I'm joking. Just, I love you, mom.
I love your sense of humor. But as we get out, what's the last word you would say to the businessmen out there? Advice to them. I know that you have experience. Like you said, everything you say and talk about is out of experience.
I think what we need to remember is our role as business leaders is to keep our economies going so that we can create jobs and give people dignity. And I think we need to remember that it's not about us, but it's about being of service to our communities and to our countries and leaving a better legacy than the one we've inherited.
Thank you very much, Vusi. It's been
humbled.
a pleasure having you on People and Power.
Thank you so much.
Out of your very busy schedule, and he's got a great sense of humor. Well, that's all we had time for on People and Power. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Let's get online and continue with the conversation at NBS TV on Twitter, NBS Television on Facebook, and Next Media Services on YouTube. I am Mildred Tohai. Say good evening and God bless you.